Morning, Pauline.
Hello, we are now live.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the Northern Planning Committee. I am Councillor Paul Wynne, the chair of the committee. This meeting is being live streamed so members of the public can hear the audio of the meeting and view the papers shown on the screen. If any committee member experiences technical difficulties during the meeting, please contact IT on the number you already have. Please mute your microphones unless asked to speak and remute after speaking. Use the chat function to indicate you want to speak, but nothing else, because the debate has to be heard by those listening to the audio feed. Members should ensure that they are present throughout the meeting, as you cannot vote on any item if you have not heard all the debate. As chair, I will interpret the council's existing standing orders in light of the requirements of remote participation, with advice from the monitoring officer prior to making our ruling. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee to confirm their presence and disclosable pecuniary interest. Can members and officers introduce themselves each time before they speak, so those listening know who is speaking? Roll call in disclosable pecuniary interests. Members must disclose any pecuniary interest in any matters to be discussed which is not included in the register of interest, and leave the meeting by turning off their camera, muting their microphone prior to the matter being discussed. We will now go to the roll call, starting Roy Aldercroft.
That's better. Yes, present and no pecuniary interests.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholas Bardsley.
Present and no pecuniary interest, Chair.
Councillor Gerald Aiken.
Present, Chair. No pecuniary interest.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Dick.
Present and no pecuniary interest.
Councillor Nat Green.
Present, no pecuniary interest, other than to mention that I am a twin-hatted member of Shrewsbury Town Council and on the Town Council Planning Committee.
Thank you, Nat. Councillor Vince Hunt.
Present with no pecuniary interest, but I'm getting feedback if somebody's not switched their mic off.
Yeah, so is I. Mine stopped now, so we're everybody all right?
Gerald.
Can you mute, please, Gerald?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Jones.
I am here, thank you, and no pecuniary interests.
Thank you. Councillor Pamela Mosley.
Present Chair, no pecuniary interest. I am a member of Shrewsbury Town Council, but not a member of the Planning Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keith Roberts.
Present Chair, like my colleague Councillor Green, I'm twin-hatted, so a member of Shrewsbury Town Council Planning Committee.
Thank you. Councillor David Vasmere. Councillor Vasmere.
Chairman, it's Emily Marshall, Committee Officer speaking. I think he's having technical difficulties. He's trying to join the meeting.
Thank you, Emily. We'll come back to that when he joins, okay? Myself, Paul Wynne, I have no pecuniary interests. Please can the officers now confirm their presence?
Kelvin Hall, Principal Planning Officer.
Any other planning officers?
Tim Rogers, Area Planning Manager.
Thank you. Solicitor?
Good afternoon, Chair. Idris Iqbal, Solicitor.
Thank you. Committee officers?
Good afternoon, Chair. It's Emily Marshall, Committee Officer.
Thank you.
And Shelley Davis, Committee Officer.
Thank you, Shelley. I shall now turn to the items on the agenda. Number 1, apologies. Are there any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. It's Emily Marshall, Committee Officer speaking. There are no apologies for absence, but I think we're waiting for David Vasmer to join.
Thank you. Number 2, minutes. To confirm the minutes of the Northern Planning Committee held on the 15th September 2020. I move that the minutes of the previous Northern Planning Committee meeting held on the 15th September 2020 are circulated, be signed as a correct record. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Councillor Roy Allcroft.
Thank you very much, Roy. I'll now accept these minutes as a true record unless anyone else indicates differently. Give you a couple of seconds. Okay, item 3, public questions. Committee's officer, are there any public questions?
It's Emily Marshall, committee officer. There are no public questions.
Thank you. Disclosure of community interest. This has been dealt with during the initial roll call of the meeting. Turning to the substantive items, the planning officer will present the item, then we'll deal with the public speaking part of the meeting, then open it to the members of the committee to be debated. Item 5, Chestnut Close, Shrewsbury. Kelvin.
Thank you, Chair. Kelvin Hall, Principal Planning Officer. This is an application for the erection of a single-storey front extension and a two-storey side extension with alterations and improvements to the dwelling and to the driveway. And the address is 4 Chestnut Close, Shrewsbury. Just draw your attention to the additional representations. There's one from Councillor Nutting who confirms that he objects to the application on the grounds that a two-storey extension on the boundary will have a serious detrimental effect on the neighbouring property. A more detailed objection from Councillor Nutting is included in the committee report at para 4.1.2. And just one further thing, if members are minded to grant permission, officers recommend that this is subject to a further condition to require that details of external materials are submitted for approval. Next slide, please. So the property is located at the end of a cul-de-sac within a residential area of Shrewsbury, outlined in red on this slide. This shows the outline of the main dwelling with the existing single-storey element to the side, to the east, which is built adjacent to the property boundary. Next slide. This shows the footprint of the proposed extensions with the single-storey front extension along the southern elevation and the two-storey side extension to the east. Next slide. This shows the footprints in closer view. Next slide. This is a satellite view of the existing house and the surrounding area. It's central to this slide, just to the south of the large tree in the centre of the image, showing the neighbouring properties. Next slide, please. This is the existing floor plans and elevations. You see the existing single-storey side element is top left, and bottom left you can see the footprint of the existing side element as well, which comprises a study and a garage at present. Next slide. These are the proposed elevations. The height of the proposed side extension has now been amended so that it is lower than the height of the existing house. You can see from the bottom right elevation that there are no windows on the side elevation facing the neighbouring property, and the front extension has now been amended to provide a pitched roof rather than a flat roof. The materials to be used would match the existing house, including timber boarding as shown. Next slide. The front extension will provide an extended kitchen, and the side extension will provide a garage, a study and a hall at ground floor, and a master bedroom at first floor level. Next slide. So these are the photos of the property. This is showing the front of the property and the drive leading up to it. You can see it's set back some way from the street. Next slide. On the left-hand photo, you can see the window in the first floor of the neighbouring property, which overlooks the site. And then the right-hand photo shows the two properties together. Next slide. And this is the street scene that you get as you approach the property, with the application site property central and then the neighbouring property to the right. So the main issues raised here are the impacts on the neighbouring property. Objections raised consider that the proposal represents overdevelopment, with the two-storey side extension going up to the boundary. Also, concerns have been raised regarding the proximity of the extension to the first floor window on the neighbouring property and impacts on light. The distance between the proposed side extension and the neighbouring house will be just over 3 metres. The width of the proposed extension is about 25 centimetres narrower than the existing side element. So officers consider that the proposal would have some impact on the neighbouring property, but there would still remain more than 3 metres gap between the extension and the neighbouring property, and the impacts raised are not unacceptable, and therefore officers recommend that planning permission is granted. And that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin. Any public speakers on this matter have submitted written statements to be read out in accordance with the revised procedure for public speaking. The local member may read out their own, or may have elected for the solicitor to also read theirs. Can the solicitor read out any statements, please?
Thank you, Chair. Idris Iqbal, solicitor. We have a statement from Neil McDougall on behalf of his mother, Mary McDougall, owner of number 3 Chestnut Close, Copthorne, and they are against the application. And it reads, not following county development principles. The proposed 2-storey extension goes to the boundary of 3 and 4 Chestnut Close. Shropshire Core Strategy Policy CS6, Sustainable Design and Development Principles. This policy seeks to ensure any extensions and alterations are sympathetic to the size, mass, character and appearance of the original property and surrounding area. It has been pointed out by local councillor Peter Nutting that no other house nearby has a similar extension along its boundary. This is true in particular for number 1, which while it has a 2-storey ring, this stops and drops down to 1 storey several metres from the boundary. The Town Council has also pointed out there is no precedent for 2-storey extensions to the boundary within the area of Shrewsbury. It is therefore asserted that the county's sustainable development principles have not been followed, as the proposed extension is not sympathetic with the surrounding area. Peter Nutting added, the extension will have a detrimental effect on the neighbouring property by way of its size and height. This is not a small property, and the planned extension will have a massive effect that will impact on the neighbouring property. The Town Council also raised concerns that this extension is a significant overdevelopment of the site. It is therefore further asserted that the size and mass of the extension are also not sympathetic with the surrounding area. Significant harm arises to the neighbouring residents' amenity. There is approximately 3.6 metres from the boundary to the neighbouring property, 3 Chestnut Close. It should be noted that all of this gap would in future be on number 3's side of the boundary. By implication, the current and any future owner of number 3 will not be able to extend in the direction of number 4. It is asserted this harms neighbouring residents' amenity, as a gap will need to be maintained, but all on one side of the boundary. Concerns have been raised over loss of light. There is no doubt that there will be a significant reduction in light reaching the western elevation of number 3. This is a result of the size, height and proximity of the extension to the boundary. In particular, as number 4 is almost due west of number 3, it will throw a shadow over the yard area immediately outside of the kitchen of number 3 from the early afternoon onwards, which is currently not the case. It is asserted that this reduction in light and overshadowing of the back door of the property will harm the neighbouring residents' amenity. Overdevelopment of number 4 is therefore an infringement of Article 1 of the First Protocol of the Human Rights Act, which allows for the peaceful enjoyment of possessions. Words in italics have been taken from the Development Management Report. And no further statements on this application, Chair.
Thank you, Idris. Does the planning officer wish to clarify any points in the response? Sorry.
Calvin Hall, no thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. I will now open the debate for the committee. To comment, please indicate on the chat function if you wish to speak. The solicitor will let me know who is next to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Idris Iqbal, solicitor. Councillor Bardsley.
Thank you, Councillor Bardsley.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Nick Bardsley. My question relates to the block plan. I think it was slide number 9. If that could just be put back up on the screen, that would be very helpful. You go back a few. Yeah, my question is, I don't think there was any mention of the green line which says here as protection fencing, building contractors no access from. I'd like some explanation for that, because it appears if that piece has been sold off, the site of number 4 has been reduced quite significantly, but maybe it doesn't mean that.
Thank you, Nick. Calvin, could you put light on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Kelvin Hall. I understand that the fencing relates to the tree to the north. You see the circle T1, which I believe is a large oak tree, and so the protection fencing is to ensure that the roots of that tree aren't damaged during construction works, and therefore building contractors shouldn't have access to that part of the garden.
Thank you, Calvin. Is that okay, Nick?
Sorry, could I also ask, on the aerial photograph, it wasn't quite clear what lies immediately to the west of number 4. Is it allotments or something like that? I mean, there's a sort of strip of land which runs north from the boundary of number 4, I think. I just wondered what it was. It's not clear. And the block plan, it just looks like a narrow strip of land.
Calvin, do you know what they are? Just look like allotments, I must admit.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, Chair, and it's not in the description in the report either. So no, I wouldn't want to hazard a guess. I'm not entirely sure. Sorry.
Okay, thank you for that. Sorry about that, Nick. Any more speakers?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mosley, followed by Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Councillor Mosley.
Thank you, Chair. Another question. It relates, if it can be put up to the same block plan slide, which that's the one. It's stated in Councillor Nutting's statement and elsewhere that there's no precedent for building up to the boundary. But looking at that plan, it looks as though number 1 and 2 have both extended to their boundaries to the eastern side. I suspect they're extensions because of the unusual irregular shape rather than original construction. But both of those two, so this will be a third of 4, appear to go to the right-hand boundary. What's the position that? It looks like there is precedent rather than isn't. Could someone explain that, please?
Good question, thank you. Calvin, good luck, come on.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if the concern was about the 2-storey element of any extension up to the boundary, because as you'll see from the existing plan of the application site, that is up to the boundary already, and in fact the extension would be slightly narrower than the existing single-storey extension. So I'm wondering if the objection is concerned about a two-storey element being close or adjacent to the boundary. It's not quite clear though.
So what you're saying, Kelvin, 1, 2 and 3, the third wall, number 2, that's right on the boundary, so we presume that's a single storey one, do you? As in next to going west of number 1.
Yeah, I'm just looking now to see on a aerial on Google Maps, and it does look like the one number 2, which is obviously to the west of 1, does have a two-storey side element and then a single-storey element as well, which I think is a garage, and the garage element goes up to the boundary with number 1. Okay. So it's a similar situation by the look of it to number 4, in that the side element of the house does go directly up to the boundary.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, Idris, or indicators?
Thank you, Chair.
Vince.
Councillor Hunt.
Sorry, yeah.
Thank you. I wasn't sure whether to just jump in there or whether to wait till I was invited. So obviously you know where I took. I found this application quite interesting. I'm not going to talk too much. I don't think really about what may or may not be on the other side by way of allotments, because whilst it looks like allotments, neither of the extensions are going to be facing that particular side. So I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference to whatever's there. I did appreciate Councillor Bardsley's question on the fencing, because I had scratched my head a bit and wondered what that was. It kind of strikes this is a really interesting one, I think, because in 6.1.3 it does say that achieving well-designed places reinforces these goals at national level by requiring design policies to reflect local aspirations, ensuring developments are sympathetic to local character, visually attractive, and establish a strong sense of place. And I did pick up on that, and that's one of these things that we seem to get in planning quite a lot, which is, you know, obviously it's our opinion and somebody else's opinion, and you know, it's very hard to be prescriptive with that. I did notice that there's in the public comments by the time this paper was printed, there were only 2 representations, 1 for and 1 against. And the other area that I picked up on was 6.3.1. Where I'm not going to read the whole thing out, it's there for members to see, but there are some words always that do concern me a little bit. Believed to be a landing window. You know, if it's believed to be, then perhaps we should completely ignore that, because we don't know that it isn't, and we don't know that it is. Therefore, we don't know whether the right to enjoy a property in a principal room is affected or not. I don't know if officers can expand on that a little bit more, but I have to say the reason I find this interesting is because the single-storey extensions are already there. This kind of hovers around whether it should be an extra story. We have heard, one of the questions I was going to ask was about the other 2 properties that seem to extend to the boundary, which Councillor Mosley's already asked. But an answer to those questions, and I guess then really we have to decide what impact this is going to have in terms of street scene. I don't think it's going to have an awful lot of impact. But in terms of that one property where the window may or may not be a principal room window, it potentially could have. So some answers to that will be gratefully received.
Thank you, Vince. Calvin, could we just sort of see if we can deal with Vince's questions, please?
In terms of the window, I know that the officer has sought to clarify this, and I accept that the wording does say that it's believed to be a landing window, and I accept that we should be sure of that, and that doesn't provide a great deal of clarity. I understand that that is a landing window, but again, I can't confirm this. I'm just can just repeat what is in the committee report.
Thank you, Kelvin. Right, next one, please.
Councillor Green, please, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
Thank you. Yes, it's Councillor Nat Green here. So far, I haven't seen anything to make me want to change my view that we took in the town council. And also, the resident has also raised the issue of light, the blocking of light, which I think certainly in looking at the block plan in front of us, a autumn or winter sun, westerly sun may well be blocked by that. It would be interesting to see a shadow diagram taken. So there may well be an additional case to be made regarding the blocking of light, but we unfortunately we don't have any of that information in further information in front of us, and it would be I'd welcome the officer's comments on that.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Yeah, I must admit, how does the house sit with northwest, etc.? Because we all know which way it goes up and down, etc. So, Kelvin, can you help us out on that, please?
Well, the north is up on the block plan.
Absolutely straight up, yeah.
Yeah, so straight up. Yeah, there's no north point shown, but north is upwards. And so the extension points generally eastwards, and it would impact on light levels going into the property to the east. And members have pointed out, though, that there will still be more than 3 meters gap between the 2-storey extension and the property number 3.
Yeah, coming from the west there, this time of year, obviously, it won't come round as much, but high summer, it will be coming round a lot there. So I see where Councillor Green's coming from. Okay, so yeah. Was there anything else, Nat, on any other questions on that?
No, I think those are really the only question I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Councillor Jones, please, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question about the light, but Nat Green's asked that already, so I'm out. Thank you.
Okay, cheers.
Councillor D, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor D.
Thank you, Chairman. I think when they've bought this property, they've bought a detached property. I'm thinking of the people that live next door and where they've got daylight available to them. And I think a 2-storey extension would reduce this. And I personally think it's overdevelopment of the site, because I'm looking at satellite view 10. All looking from what it looks here, that all the other extensions are all single story, except for the one right on the end, where the 2 white cars are, or 2 white vans are, and that, you know, there is no property very close to the boundary. So I would.
You've muted yourself, Polly.
Oh God, sorry. Did you hear what I said? I thought it was overdevelopment site, and the property right on the end, on the other end of that road, is it's not close to a building, so it's not going to that hasn't impacted on the other property that's to the right of our screen. So I would propose that we refuse this application on the grounds of overdevelopment of the property.
I'll just keep that one in mind for a second, Pauline. Yeah. All right. Wait.
Sorry, I thought everybody had finished speaking.
Not sure yet.
No.
Is there any more, Idris?
No further indications to speak, Chair.
Okay. Well, I'll go back to you, Pauline. So, right, if there are no more speakers, please can I have a proposer and seconder?
So I thought I got my hand raised there.
You have to indicate on the chat.
I see it there. Raise your hand like that. I had that. Can anybody see that?
No.
No.
When you no, but can the monitor see that?
No.
It needs to be done in the chat bar by writing it, I think, Gerald.
All right, not just raising your hand. No, okay, fine.
You
Right.
want to speak, Gerald?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Yeah.
I can understand this right to light, but they don't. As we said, if that's got the window on number 2, if that's a landing window, it won't have much effect on that. And that part of the garden is not a major part of the garden. It might be affected slightly, but it'll be affected now anyway to a certain degree. I don't think this will have a great deal of effect on that property of number 2.
Thank you. Any more interest?
No further indications, Chair.
We've got a bit of a... Gerald, could you mute yourself, please? We've got feedback. Thank you. Right, we have no votes. So if there are no more speakers, please can I have proposer and seconder? I'm going back to Pauline now because she indicated before she wanted to propose.
Yeah, I propose that we reject this application on, taking into consideration the comments made by Shrewsbury Town Council and the local councillor, that it's a significant overdevelopment of the site. And they feel that there's no precedent for 2-storey extensions to the boundary within this area.
Thank you, Pauline. Do I have a seconder?
Chair, Councillor Keith Roberts, I'll second that.
Thank you, Keith. Okay, we have a proposer and seconder. So confirm those right, hang on. Right, we will now take the vote. The solicitors will read out the names of the committee members present, entitled to vote, and then confirm the result of the vote. Thank you, Idris.
Thank you, Chair. Please can I remind members to only vote on the item if they've been present from the beginning. So we have a proposer and a seconder to refuse permission contrary to the officer's recommendation. Councillor Oldcroft?
Yeah, I'm for.
Thank you. Councillor Bardsley?
For.
Councillor Dakin?
Against.
Councillor D?
For.
Councillor Green?
For.
Councillor Jones?
Against.
Councillor Mosley?
For.
Councillor Roberts?
For.
Councillor Hunt? For. Councillor Wynne?
For.
Thank you, Chair. I have it 4, 2, 4, 8, 4, and 2 against.
Okay, so that has been refused against the officer's recommendation. Okay, right. Now we'll move to item 6. Proposed dwelling on the east side of Primrose Drive, Shrewsbury, Shropshire. Can the planning officer present this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. Kelvin Hall, Principal Planning Officer. This is an application for the erection of a self-built dwelling and formation of vehicle access on land at Primrose Drive in Shrewsbury. I'll draw your attention to the additional representation received, which is summarised in the schedule which was circulated yesterday. This is from a local resident, and the matters raised are covered in the committee report. So you can see from the slide here, the application site is located at the rear garden of a property on Honeysuckle Row, as seen in the top right. So Honeysuckle Row property is on the eastern side of the application site. The proposal is for a detached 2-storey dwelling with a small front garden, a rear garden, and parking for 2 cars to the side. It will be sited to the south of the garage of the neighbouring property to the north that you can see on the left-hand side, just under where it says garden cottage. On that plan, you can also see a footpath to the south which meets the street at the southern end of the site, which goes off diagonally. Next slide, please. This is a satellite view. It shows the approximate extent of the application site in relation to the surrounding area, and you can see the garden land that is proposed to be taken up with the proposed development. Next slide. This shows it's a two-storey dwelling of brick and tile construction. You'll see on the bottom that there's no elevations, no windows on either of the side elevations. On the rear elevation, which is at the top right, 2 of those windows would be of obscure glass. Next slide. This is the floor plan drawing. Can show 3 bedrooms in the first floor and the porch on the ground floor. Next slide. The applicant has provided some computer generated images of how a development would look. Officers have referred to these in para 6.7.2 of the committee report. Members should treat these as generalised images only. They're not intended to show every detail, but just to give a picture of how the property would fit in relation to the surrounding area. So if you just flick through these, you can see the proposed property with the car to the right hand side. You can see the properties to the rear, Honeysuckle Row, in the top image there, and then that top image also shows the adjacent footpath as well to the right, where it meets the footway of Primrose Drive. Next slide. So these are the photos of the site. This is from the south looking north. The plot is behind the tall conifer hedge to the left of the timber fence. Next slide. These are taken looking directly at the plot from the opposite side of the road. Apologies for the angles. You can see the conifer hedge that currently is at the front of the plot. That will be removed as part of the proposal. Next slide. This is a photo from the north. You can see the garage of the neighbouring house. That's it, and the brick boundary wall, which extends to the back of the footway, just behind the wheelie bin. Yes. So the committee report sets out the planning history of this site, including the 3 previous refusals for a dwelling on the site, and also an appeal against one of these refusals, which was dismissed. The committee report also shows the different designs that have been put forward in each of those 3 refused schemes. The main reason for refusal of the previous schemes were relating to overdevelopment of the site and the adverse impact on the character and appearance of the area. The current proposal would be set further forward than the existing general pattern of housing on the estate, and officers do accept in the report that the house would be highly visible and prominent in the street scene, as noted in 6.3.2 of the report. However, the current design is of a house with a much narrower width than previously put forward, as there will be no garage or annex as in previous schemes, and officers feel that this would ensure that the house would sit more comfortably within the plot and would not appear cramped. Some objections have been raised over the impacts on proximity to neighbouring houses. The house would be side on to the property to the north, who have got the garage, and around 10.5 metres away from the actual property to the north. Distance from the houses to the rear would be around 18 metres, which officers consider would be acceptable for this proposal. There's no objection from the highways team, and officers feel that the layout of the parking spaces is acceptable and that there would be sufficient visibility between the driveway and the adjacent footpath to avoid safety issues, subject to the boundary hedge being cut back to 600 millimeters to improve visibility. So in conclusion, officers do recognise that there will be some impacts on the local area, but on balance, and consider that permission can be granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kelvin. Can the solicitor read out any public speaking statements, please?
Thank you, Chair. The statement by Councillor Tony Parsons as the local ward councillor against the proposal, and it reads, I share many of the concerns expressed by Shrewsbury Town's Council that the amendments made by the applicant to their previous applications have not addressed concerns raised when those applications were considered. In my opinion, this application, if accepted, would constitute an overdevelopment of this small site, as well as having an adverse impact on the local street scene, being out of keep with the surrounding properties. Although this application has reduced the bulk of the building by removing the detached garage and providing 2 parking spaces, the building would still be too close to the footpath and road, Primrose Drive, and will be overbearing on the local street scene. In the design statement provided, the photographs of other properties in the area are unrepresentative of this proposed development, showing large lawned areas between the properties and the road, far larger than what is proposed here. In my opinion, the application is contrary to the requirements of policy CS6 of the Shropshire Core Strategy and SAMDEV policy MD2. This site is simply not large enough for a development of this size. It is the 4th attempt at a backyard development in the grounds of 12 Honeysuckle Row. This application should be refused. It appears that the frontage has been designed slightly further away from the footpath than previous applications, thereby reducing the size of the rear garden at the cost of that amenity. The house would still stand out as an intrusive feature and will be far too prominent in the street scene. Fletcher Estates planned the Sutton Park development. When built in the 1980s as an open plan and well spaced out estate with lots of green areas, especially ensuring that each house was situated well back from the road, giving extra vision and safety when entering and exiting the property's driveways, the application does not meet this criteria and will be out of keeping with the rest of the estate. One of the key concerns is with regards to the site's position on a significant bend on Primrose Drive. Vehicles leaving the proposed property, particularly in reverse, would do so at risk. I accept that 2 parking places for a property at this size should be sufficient, but additional street parking from visitors would add to the problem on this stretch of road. The plot sits adjacent to the busy public footpath between Sutton Park and Reebrook Estates, under Hazeldine Way. Both walkers and cyclists frequently use this pathway, and cars reversing out of the parking spots at the proposed property would create a safety hazard. The planning inspector, during the appeal on previous application with reference 16/05410/FUL, considered that the main issue was the effect of the development on the character and appearance of the area. In the decision letter, the inspector made the following remarks. The house will be sited significantly further forward in the plot than others in the immediate vicinity. The siting combined with the curve of the road means that the house will be highly visible and prominent in the street scene. The 2-storey element of the house will be furthest forward, which would accentuate its visual impact. Overall, the house would stand out as an obtrusive feature that would not blend in with its surroundings. The proposed boundary treatment will be insufficient to mitigate the visual impact of the development. All of these issues remain unchanged. If you are considering accepting this application, then you should refer your decision to view in person the street scene. Whilst this makes life more difficult during the COVID-19 pandemic, it is crucial in this case. In the officer's recommendation in 6.3.4, he tells you that the building has been reduced in size and that this would, on balance, make the application more acceptable. What you are not told when looking at the comparison is that the plot size has been similarly reduced from 330 square meters on the original application, in brackets 16/04175/4, to 315 square meters for the further application and to 289.5 square meters for this application. This application does nothing to enhance the neighbourhood, is highly visible and prominent in the street scene, as well as being shoehorned onto a cramped site. It has an adverse impact on the neighbours' properties, particularly Garden Cottage and houses in Honeysuckle Row. It fails to meet the requirements of CS6 and SAMDEV policy MD2 and therefore should be refused. There's also a statement from the agent in response, Chair.
Thank you.
Heel Planning are an experienced planning consultancy with significant planning experience and employees who have decades of experience working with the public sector at national levels. We carefully evaluated the planning history of the prior 3 planning applications, as well as the appeal, to consider whether there were planning merits to a further application on this site, which is, in all manners, an unattractive section of the estate with a high overgrown hedge that is clearly visually intrusive, and a site that is not well landscaped and does not afford the level of resistance being asserted to what is a modest single dwelling proposal for development. The site can more than account for the development, and this does not amount to overdevelopment. The rear garden space is more than adequate for a modern home of this size, and the dwelling is set back slightly from the front and so is not overbearing to the street scene. What is stated about the overdevelopment of the site is essentially a regurgitation of prior issues on prior applications that were different to this one, and unfortunately shows no planning acumen or expertise, or a considered review of what has been presented here, and elected members are urged to please attribute limited weight to the statement made. The astute planning officer for the local authority has in their professional assessment recommended approval for the scheme. We also note that a prior more significant scheme on the site was also recommended for approval by a prior planning officer previously. Reference to the prior appeal is made. Having analysed this, it was a borderline approval, with the overriding material concern being the garage adjacent to the main dwelling, which in the view of the inspector generated additional unacceptable bulk to the front of elevation. This proposal does not include a garage, which significantly alters that position and removes the prior material concern. The concerns over the garden space and the siting of the building being forward on the side are peripheral concerns, which in their own right do not present material concerns. They would only amount to one with the addition of the front bulking. The street scene perspectives provided clearly demonstrate that this proposal will not dominate the street scene, and that it will blend very well into it from various angles and vantage points. The comments about safety issues are equally unfounded, as the proposal has been assessed and considered by the highway section of the council, and as experts, they have no concerns. The comments being made are misleading and equally unsubstantiated. Elected members are respectfully called upon to be objective and consider the facts and the evidence before them, and to balance their attempts to influence their decision from a subjective and uninformed position, evident in the unfortunate submission that detracts away from the merits of the application, which is a carefully considered and very well designed proposal, and support the planning officer's recommendation. As a final note, were this to go to appeal, Heel Planning consider that this is likely to generate a favourable outcome, and so the elected members are asked to conserve the wasted time and expense of the various officers involved, as well as the officers, if a political rather than a well-evidenced planning decision is made here today. That's the end of the public speaking statements, Chair.
Thank you, Idris. Two very interesting statements, I feel. I'm not sure about the last sentence of the last one, though, I must admit, but never mind. Right. Sorry? Okay. Does the planning officer wish to clarify any points in response?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members of the committee can now comment, please. So I'll go to Idris to see who's indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bardsley.
Thank you, Councillor Bardsley.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Nick Bardsley. My question relates to car parking and garage, which the agent makes a big point that the garage is not included. Forgive me if I've missed something, but I think that permitted development rights would allow a garage to be built almost immediately, and therefore you'd be back to, you know, the previously considered unacceptable outcome. If there's somewhere in the report a proposal to remove permitted development rights, forgive me, I've missed it. But if they're not removed, then I'm pretty sure you could build a garage without a planning application. I mean, that's my question, Chair.
Good, thank you. Good question, actually. I think you can condition it, but Kelvin?
Thank you, Chair. Kelvin Hall. Yes, certainly we could, if members were minded to approve, we could add a condition to remove permitted development rights, which I think would be justified given the size of the plot and the proposed dwelling size as well. Thank you, Chair.
Good point. Next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dakin, please.
Okay, Councillor Dakin. Councillor Dakin. You're on mute. If you think you're talking, Gerald, you're on mute. Right, we'll go to the next one then.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mosley.
Somebody's mobile, can you switch it off, please?
That wasn't me singing.
Right, Councillor Mosley, thank you.
Thank you. I was going to say quite a lot on this, but having read Councillor Parsons' statement, I think he's done a very good job of saying a lot of what I was going to speak about. Firstly, I think this application is one we've had quite a lot recently where I know nothing can be done about it, where a site visit would have been most beneficial. Sometimes we see things on site visits which aren't easy to pick up from the paperwork. I know this site from when the Central Planning Committee previously considered it and we refused it, and by chance I've also cycled past it fairly recently, so I do know the site. So Councillor Parsons does explain his reasons very well. This is the fourth application for this site, and I think very little has changed with regard to the principles and the reasons this has been refused and subsequently dismissed properly, in my view, at appeal. In addition to Councillor Parsons' submissions, there have also been 15 objections from local residents, which is a very high number, as we know, and also the Town Council has objected. The design statement provided by the applicant attempts to downplay and dismiss the many objections from all three sources, and claim that the previous rejections have been instrumental in the design of this application, in that they've taken into account things that are wrong with them and remedied them in this, but I don't feel that is actually the case. I think that the chief reasons for rejection in the past, that of overdevelopment, lack of sympathy with the surroundings, the built form of the neighbourhood, this being backland development and highway safety still essentially stand. In the design and access statement, the statement was made that the appeal decision was borderline, but I don't feel that the case at all. The agent also states in his response to Councillor Parsons that the high overgrown hedge is an unsightly feature which generates harm, but that's quite easily remedied. The owner of number 12 could just cut it back. It hasn't been cut, I believe, for about 4 years. That's easily solved. And the agent also, again, wrongly in my view, calls it an unattractive section of the estate, which is clearly not the case. It's a very attractive estate built with far more generous plots and surroundings than we see today, and it's a very nice estate. In fact, the garden size I think is small for the proposed dwelling, and by definition the garden size 12 Honeysuckle Row, both are in my view not appropriate of a generous enough size for the gardens, for the house to go with the houses. The car parking at the moment, they're either be driving in or reversing out, and I think it's a very, I think the word sinuous has been used, a very windy road. And I think this is not the right spot next to a busy pedestrian and cycle path next door to it. Just to conclude, in the design access statement, the opinion is given by the agent to the applicant. If refused, this will succeed at appeal. Well, this is something that we could find out if we do, hopefully, I think, refuse the application, which I would support. And I would echo what the chair said as he started the debate, as I think that comment about political decisions rather than objective ones is really very unfortunate comment, because I've never felt, sitting on planning committees as I have, that we make political decisions. We make decisions based on the merits of the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mosley. Next one.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Vasma.
Councillor Vasma. Councillor Vasma, you're on mute if you...
Sorry, I don't know how much you heard. I'd just like to support Councillor Mosley in what she was saying, and I'd like to quiz the officers on 7.2, the paragraph, and over the page and the report, they state that the proposed layout would impact on the character and appearance of the area. However, the officers are of the view that given the context of the site, this change to the visual character of the area would not be unacceptable. Now, I'd just like to quiz them. Firstly, given the context of the site, I'd like to know what they mean by that. And secondly, presumably that suggests that the officers that this is a difficult decision to make, that it could go either way. They've plumped to recommend this application, but it would seem to me there are still very good reasons to refuse it.
Thank you, Councillor Vasma. Right, any more speakers?
Councillor D, please, Chair.
Councillor D.
Thank you, Chairman. I support everything that Councillor Parsons and Councillor Mosley have said, because and having read through the inspectors, the appeal inspectors' comments, I take all that on board. And like yourself, I find this saying it's a political decision. I think that's quite an insult to us, because most of us have been on planning committees for many years. And that's what it is. Was I right in hearing that the plot size has been reduced? That's what the one question. And the regards, as we've said previously, the conifer hedge is owned by, I should think, the applicant, and they've got quite easily could cut it down and make the site make the look much better, and it's in their hands. So I think to use that as an excuse or as a reason for getting planning permission, I think is ridiculous. So I just cannot see how this can be this passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Right, we'll just go to Kelvin. Can you just ask about the size plot? Has it been reduced, Kelvin?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is likely to be reference to the size of the application site, which may well have altered because of the change to the design. I'm not sure that the actual boundary to the rear end of the rear garden has changed particularly significantly. There's still about 8.5 meters length of garden to the proposed dwelling, and about 9.5 meters remaining for the garden to the rear and honeysuckle row. The width is obviously still the same of the property, because it goes from the boundary wall to the north to the boundary hedge to the south. So it might be drafting errors, but I don't think the actual physical dimensions of the site have changed significantly over the years. In relation to the comments that Councillor Vasma made about the context to the site, it is a finely balanced recommendation. I think the context includes the type of approach that you get to the site, including the fact that it is on a bend, and therefore, although officers do recognise that it would be, highly visible, and we've made that comment in the committee report, highly visible doesn't necessarily mean that it will have an unacceptable impact on the character and appearance of the area. It just means that it would be not hidden, it would be visible in the street scene. However, because you go on a road which is quite windy, it wouldn't necessarily, in officers' view, be overly dominating the street scene, and that is the context that we're referring to there. And just to pick up on the point that the applicants have made about the potential for appeal, I don't think members should be influenced by that in making a recommendation. If members refuse the application, then obviously it will be the applicant's right to appeal, and I don't think the threat of that should influence members' decision in any way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Calvin. Do you have any more questions?
Councillor Hunt, please, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt. Mute. Vince. Must be on mute, Vince.
He's dropped out, hasn't he?
Looks like he's having problems. Okay. Right. Do we have any more questions?
He's asked to be re-invited.
Okay, we'll go to the next question and let.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Apologies for that. I just had a box that popped up and said Windows has encountered a problem and will shut down in 1 minute, and then it duly shut down on me. So
okay.
I apologise for that. So I will now not vote on this, and I will refrain from comment as I've missed part of the debate. Apologies.
Okay, thank you, Vince. We didn't realise you were there, not there, but I thought it went very quiet, but never mind. Right, any more questions, Idris?
Councillor Oldcroft, please, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Oldcroft.
Yeah, I just noticed I've got the site up on Google Earth. There's a fair amount of green there. It seems like the original developer was looking at including quite large gardens around this whole site. And from what's described, the shoehorning of this building onto this patch of land really doesn't fit into what I'm seeing here. I agree with the statements that the gardens would be small, and it would give the impression that, yeah, there's a patch of land there, let's squeeze something onto it. So yeah, I just wanted to make that comment. If you look at it from the air, it looks it's big enough to be relaxing and recreational, but small enough not to have a house and a garden on it. Cheers.
Cheers. Can we just go back to that slide, please, just so we can remind everybody how big or small it is? It is a big garden. Can we go back to the one before, the aerial one, please? I don't know. If you look at the other gardens, they're not as big as that. That's just my personal comment. If you look at the other houses, that's the biggest garden by a bit. Do we have any more questions?
Councillor Bardsley, please, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bardsley.
Forgive me, Chair. It's Nick Bardsley again. I do think we should be clear about the plot size. Councillor Parsons is very specific in suggesting that the plot size has been reduced from 330 square metres to a shade under 290 square metres for this application. That's a 40 square metre difference. You know, it's more than a 10% reduction if Councillor Parsons' figures are correct from the original application. I think we should be clear about this because you know, it is squeezing a house into a small space, and it sounds, if Councillor Parsons is correct, as if the space is quite a bit smaller than the original 330 square metres. I'm a bit concerned that the officer isn't clear as to how big the plot is. It seems to be quite important in considering this application.
Thank you, Nick. Just going, Kelvin, is that the house size or the plot size?
Councillor Parsons says it's the plot size that's been reduced.
Thank you, Chair. Kelvin Hall.
Thank you, Kelvin.
It's not that I'm not aware of how big the plot size is. It's just that to hand, I don't have details as to the plot sizes of the previous applications. Members are obviously being asked to look at this particular application, and therefore that they need to be aware of what the particular circumstances of this particular application are. I've just measured the plot myself as about 293 square metres for this particular application.
Thank you, Calvin. So that explains it, I think, Nick, doesn't it? Right, do we have any more questions?
Councillor D, please, Chair.
There you go, Councillor D.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bardsley. It's Pauline D. Councillor Bardsley for finding out where it was that I got that information from about the reduction of the plot. I still think that it's overdevelopment, and I am concerned about the parking as well, because it's on quite a nasty bend, and I would go to, it looks like somebody needs to propose it. If I would propose that that we object to this application.
Yeah, I would just to see if you've got any more comments from anybody.
Yeah.
I'll come back to you, Pauline.
Sorry, Councillor Mosley next, please, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Mosley.
Thank you, Chair. It's just it's an attempt to try and clarify that plot size. From what I remember reading through the objections from residents, the figures quoted by Councillor Parsons are actually contained in one of the objections, and it referred to plot size. So I think someone has at some point done the exercise of measuring one of the original earlier 3 applications and measured this one and come down to that discrepancy between the plot size has got smaller as the applications have gone on. That's how I read it. But the other point I would make, while we're on that slide with the Google Earth view, if you look at 12 Honeysuckle Row, which is the existing property with the largest garden, look what is left behind for 12 Honeysuckle Row. You've got the house, you've got the modest rear garden, if this were to go ahead. You've got quite a substantial front garden and the garage. You look at the difference between those 2 houses. There's probably twice as much land area for the original house. This is about a third of the total plot, and it really is shoehorning in, I feel, and I think that slide does show it very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mosley. Do you have any more questions? Right, are there any points the planning officer or solicitor would wish to clarify?
Kelvin Hall, no thank you, Chair.
Okay. Idris, is there anything you'd like to say? Nope. Okay. There's no more questions. Right, could I have a proposer, please? I'll come back to Pauline because I sort of stopped halfway through. So, Pauline, would you like to put a proposal forward?
Yeah, I would again like taking on Shrewsbury Town Council's objections from their members. They are listed on page 17 at the top. Overdevelopment in a backland development and not in keeping with the existing street scene. They would lead to a loss of privacy for neighbouring properties, and also again with their driveway provides enough space to turn a vehicle to allow access and egress from the site in a forward gear, and my concerns there on safety as well, and that whether that's enough. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I shall clarify that in a second. Thank you, Pauline.
Yep.
Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair. I've put on the chat. Councillor Mosley here. I've put on the chat function. I'd like to second it, please, with the same reasons that Pauline gave, and I would add highway safety to that, as Pauline did at the end, to the Town Council comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mosley. Right. So now we'll take the votes.
Sorry, Chair. It's Tim Rogers here. Area Planning Manager. Sorry, I just wanted to just clarify a few points before you go to the vote, because in moving her motion, Councillor D referred to backland development. Well, this isn't backland development, in as much as backland development basically involves the development of land behind an existing property that doesn't have a road frontage and is generally accessed down the side of the existing property. And you'll see from this that there is a road frontage to the plot, and it's not intended to access down the side of the existing plot. So I wouldn't make any reference, I wouldn't be comfortable with including any reference to backland development in the decision. And also, I would just...
We'll take that on board.
Yeah, I could. Well, we'll add it instead. It's not in keeping with the existing street scene and plan of the estate, the original plan of the estate.
I accept that point, and we can take that point. Excuse me, sorry, there's someone at my door now as well. But the second point was to do with the highway safety, and of course, I would just warn members that including a reason for highway safety does open us up to challenge on costs, certainly on that element, because we do have the comments of the highway officers that haven't raised any objection to that. But I'll leave you to just consider that point, the Chair, for the time being. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Could I just have some advice from Idris on that, please, as well? Could we use that as a reason? Highways, once they've said it's all right, but we've been here before. In someone's opinion is one way, in other opinion another way, but could we clarify that, please? Are we allowed to use that as a reason?
Thanks, Chair. I think highways have they've already concluded they have no issue with the proposal, so to rely on it for a refusal reason, in my opinion, wouldn't be sufficient.
Okay, I'm just sort of preempting this, Pauline.
Yeah.
And Pam, that maybe you'd like to withdraw that reason because it might be held against the council putting it forward.
And Councillor Mosley here. Yes, I'm happy to withdraw that if it's wise to do so.
Yeah, I'm fine. Do we not take into account the local knowledge?
Highway said it's okay.
Yeah.
So you can't fight against that, but I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
There is local knowledge, and obviously it's on a bit of a bend, and it's well used. So we found out through local people. But there you go.
Yeah, it's definitely overdevelopment. It's
just right. Going back to Idris now, the solicitor. Have we got enough reasons for it to be refused? Idris?
I think we'd direct that question to the planning officer and whether he's happy for the reasons for refusal, Chair.
Okay, let's go to you, Kelvin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would support the removal of the matter relating to highway safety. I think safety could be improved through the imposition of conditions, and therefore, if that were the case, then we shouldn't include it as a reason for refusal. The other reasons are in line with previous refusal reasons as well, which have been based upon character and appearance and impacts on neighbouring properties. So so I don't have any problems with those recommended reasons for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm just looking for the proposer and seconder. Are you happy with that, you two?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much, Kelvin, for your help. Thank you, Idris. Thank you.
Councillor Mosley, are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you to Kelvin.
I just want to get everything settled before we take the vote. So if we're all happy now, we will go and take the vote now. Solicitor will read out the names of the committee members in turn.
Thank you, Chair. Prior to taking the vote, I'll just double check to make sure Councillor Dakin was present for the entirety of the item. I know we had issues when after a request to speak.
Yes, I heard it all. I had issues because I went on to chat and couldn't get back again. But I
Okay,
debate.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we have a proposer and seconder, which is to refuse permission contrary to the officer's recommendation. I'll now go in turn and read out your names. Please, can you confirm whether you're for or against the proposal? Councillor Oldcroft?
For.
Councillor Bardsley?
For.
Councillor Dakin?
For.
Councillor D?
For.
Councillor Green?
For.
Councillor Jones?
For.
Councillor Mosley?
For.
Councillor Roberts?
For.
Councillor Vasma?
For.
And Councillor Wynne.
For. So
can it be please noted though in the minutes that I have abstained from that vote because my computer shut down and I missed part of the debate.
yeah, thank you, Vince. So that has gone against the officer's recommendation unanimously. Sorry, Idris, have I jumped the gun there? Are you supposed to say that?
No, that's fine, Chair. You can say it is unanimous.
It's not unanimous because I abstained.
But you don't count because you abstained, Vince. There you go. Right, so that's been against the officer has been refused. Okay. Right, now we'll move on to item 7, St Lawrence House, Bellevue Gardens. Erection of a single-storey rear and side extension. Can the planning officer please present this?
Thank you, Chair. Kelvin Hall, Principal Planning Officer. This is an application for the erection of a single-storey rear and side extension at St Lawrence House, 37C Bellevue Gardens in Shrewsbury. Next slide, please. The property is a modern two-storey house with detached garage within the conservation area of Shrewsbury. As you'll see on this plan, surrounding land is in residential use. Next slide. This is a satellite view of the area. The application site is in the centre of the image, just to the northwest of just to the north of the white vehicle. There you can see the property and the garage to the northeast. And you can see that the closest neighbouring properties are to the north. Next slide. This is the plan of the existing property, showing the property and the garage to the northeast. Next slide. And this shows the extent of the proposed extension, the footprint of the rear extension and side extension in a shaded area. Next slide. This is the existing ground floor plan. The extension would come out from the dining room to the side of the dining room and to the rear of the dining room. Next slide. This is the existing elevations of the property. You can see the proposed rear of the house on the top left there, and the dining room's on the right hand side. Next slide. So these are the proposed elevations. You will see that the proposed extension in white there would have is a single story with a flat roof, and would wrap around the rear and the side of the property. The photo in the bottom right is of another house with a similar type of extension on it. It's not intended to depict the size of the extension being proposed here. It just indicates the level of glazing being proposed. Next slide. This is the proposed floor plan. You can see that the extension would extend the area of the dining room. Next slide. These are the photos of the property. This is looking a view of the rear of the property where the extension would go. Next slide. This is the view from the rear of where the extension would be, showing the neighbouring properties. Next slide. And this is the view in the opposite direction towards the garage. Planning permission was granted earlier this year for a similarly sized rear and side extension, and that one was different in design, as it proposed a pitched tile roof with brick walls, more traditional style of extension, whereas the current proposal would have a flat roof with more glazing and a rendered finish with aluminium windows and doors. As I've mentioned before, the property does lie within the conservation area, and the conservation officer has raised concerns over the design. However, she has advised that she could not sustain an outright objection to the proposal. The proposal is of a similar scale to that already approved. Officers consider that given the limited scale, it would not adversely affect the character of the conservation area. Details of the colour of materials to be used can be agreed by planning and condition, and also officers feel that it wouldn't significantly raise greater issues of amenity than the existing permission, which was granted earlier this year. Therefore, it is recommended that planning permission is granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kelvin. Can the solicitor read out any public speaking statements, please?
Thank you, Chair. There's no statements in relation to this application.
Thank you. It says here, does the planning officer wish to clarify any points in the response? Obviously not, there wasn't any. So members of the committee can now make their comments. The solicitor will indicate who is next to speak. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt here. Yeah, this one seemed a bit more difficult a few weeks ago when we first looked at it as chair and vice chair than it does now. Obviously, it has been pointed out that there is an existing planning consent on this for the extensions with slopey roofs. The right to put the extensions on has already been established. I do think it is worthy, though, of committee, because one of the concerns, or the main concerns, have been voiced by the conservation officer, and the conservation officer has subsequently indicated that whilst she feels that there are concerns with this, they're not ones that would probably be defendable should we refuse this, and it would take into appeal. The good thing about it being here, though, is that and Kelvin has mentioned this, is that we can condition the colours and finish that are used on the extensions, which was actually principally the concern of the conservation officer. So I'm actually going to move the officer's recommendation. As I say, that the right to have an extension there is already established, but I'm going to ask that officers include within that us giving them the ability to determine the colour and materials for said extensions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vince. I'll just I'll put that on hold for a second until we have the debate over, okay? But I will come back to you first. Okay, any other speakers?
Councillor Green, please, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think the primary concern of the town council was reading the conservation officer's comments, which were ambivalent at best, considering that that yes, an existing an extension had already been granted, but one that had fitted rather better with the existing building. I take the points that Councillor Hunt makes, and it'd probably be a reasonable one to take. Personally, I would have been much happier if we had a comment from the conservation officer that was rather stronger either way, frankly, in this instance. But I think I don't think it's worth taking this any further in terms of demanding deferrals and things like that. But I would be very interested to hear what Councillor Hunt has to suggest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Do you have any other speakers?
Councillor Bardsley, please, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bardsley.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask the planning office, the photograph which we were told is not of this property, I think it was on slide 35. Is it possible just to have another quick look at that? That's the one. Is it Calvin's view that the extension will look a bit like that? I mean, otherwise, you know, if it won't, why was it included? If it will look a bit like that, I mean, it seems to me to be, you know, a quite extraordinary extension in a conservation area. Like Councillor Nat Green, I'm really surprised that the conservation officer has been as ambivalent as they appear to be. I mean, that's just a comment, but I mean, it is a question as well. Will it look like that or something like that if it's built? That's my question, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, we'll go to Kelvin. Kelvin.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm sure the applicant was trying to be helpful in providing that photograph. It's possibly misleading because the photo they provided is of an extension which seems to be much bigger than the one being put forward today. I think it was getting across the type of materials that will be used in terms of it being a large amount of glazing and a more modern contemporary material rather than a brick form of the walls and a flat roof. But it goes no further than that in terms of you know, being indicative of the design being put forward. You know, you could probably gather from looking at the elevation above as to what it would look like without that photograph, but that's what's been provided. Just thought I'd point out that it's not indicative of the scale being proposed today.
Forgive me, Chair, it is indicative of something that is completely out of character with the existing glazing in the house, isn't it? I mean, the existing glazing is very traditional, and this is something completely different, which might look great if this was a Corbusier development or Frank Lloyd Wright or something like that, but this is in Shrewsbury's conservation area. I mean, it just seems to me entirely out of place. I mean, I accept that the scale is much less, but it does seem to me to be entirely out of character with the existing building.
Thank you, but it won't be seen by the road or anybody because it's well gardened off, well fenced off in that respect, in my opinion. But there you go. That's just an opinion, obviously, Ned. So yeah, okay. Do we have any more questions?
Councillor Green, please, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
Yes, maybe it could be pertinent to this if we could actually see the past application, so that we know that what could be built in any event, and that might be pertinent to this, because then that in effect is our baseline from which we're working, from the permission that has been granted.
You might be pushing your luck there, Councillor Green, but we'll have a go. We'll ask the question. Calvin, can we get the old ones up? Any chance? The old application with the pitched roof. Might be testing you a bit here.
If I'm able to share my screen, Chair, then it's possible that I can do that.
Please do. Yeah, that's great.
Sorry, Chair, before Calvin does that, can we get confirmation from the committee clerk that by Calvin sharing his screen, it won't impact this meeting being live?
Oh.
Hello, it's Emily Marshall speaking.
Too late.
Yeah, it's fine. It won't interrupt it. Shelley can just take back control when Kelvin's finished.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
I don't know whether I don't know whether, Chair, you can see this at all.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
This is the approved rear extension on here, showing the pitched roof and the more limited glazing with the patio doors. As I say, it would have a brick finish with some roof lights, but be on a similar footprint to the current proposal.
Yeah, it gets down to personal choice, I think, but there you go. I see where Councillor Barsley's coming from, conservation area, but I don't think it'll have any impact personally, but that's just my comments. Okay. Do we have any other speakers?
Councillor Mosley, please, Chair.
Councillor Mosley.
Thank you, Chair. I think you just alluded to what I was going to say anyway. I think it is a matter of taste to an extent, but this property is, I mean, if we want backland development, this is a prime example of it. It's completely landlocked. It's in a conservation area, but it's clearly a modern, in relative terms, a modern building, which can't be seen, it's a single story, it can't be seen really by anybody other than perhaps someone who lives around it looking over a fence. And I really think I can't see any reason not to approve this. You could argue whether the initial application in April or this one is the better scheme. I quite like this one. It's not going to impact on anybody else very much, and I think we should approve it personally. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, just one more point I'd just like to say. It's almost bordering on permitted development anyway. So I'm not going to, if there's no more questions, I'll go back to Vince for the proposal. Okay, no more questions. Right, Vince, coming back to you for your...
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Vince Hunt here. Yes, you're exactly right. It is subjective. I think both Councillor Wynne and myself scratched our heads when we looked at the photo in the bottom right-hand corner. These were submitted by the developers. It has a more of a disruptive effect on trying to work this one out than it does a positive one. And you know, it was our comment that they were silly to have included it because it's created more debate than actually some of the other aspects of this have. I agree that our conservation officer has been, excuse my phone ringing in the background, has been a bit ambiguous with this. Quite often from conservation officers we get far more detail than we need, and in this instance we've got probably far less than we need. Sometimes it's a help and sometimes it's a hindrance, and this time round it's kind of a something and a nothing. I absolutely agree with that, and I would hope that next time we get a bit more help with it when we're in a conservation area like this. However, we are where we are. I think the chair's right. This is virtually you know, permitted development should they wish to do it. There's the existing footprint, as I said before. I think that on appeal. I don't think we would really be able to defend this because the right to put this there has already been there. It's got a flat roof instead of a slopey roof. And as Councillor Mosley said, she prefers it. Personally, I prefer the other one, but it doesn't come down to what we prefer. It comes down to what's in policy. So hey ho, my recommendation that we accept the officer's recommendation, taking on board the extra condition that colour and materials are conditioned. I move that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Mosley, I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mosley. Right, we have a proposal in front of us, so we'll have to take the vote. The solicitor will read out the names of the committee members in turn. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I please remind members to only vote if they've been present for the whole item? We have a proposer and seconder to grant permissions subject to conditions set out in Appendix 1 and an additional condition in relation to materials and colours as indicated by Councillor Hunt. So I'll go down the list. Please can you confirm whether you're for or against the proposal? Councillor Aldcroft?
I'm for.
Councillor Bardsley?
For.
Councillor Dakin?
For.
Councillor D?
For.
Councillor Green?
For.
Councillor Jones?
For.
Councillor Mosley?
For.
Councillor Roberts?
For.
Councillor Vasmer?
For.
Councillor Hunt?
For.
And Councillor Wynne?
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
I thought I'd let you do that. Yeah, so that's going to the officer's recommendation. So, right, we'll go to item 8, appeals and appeal decisions. So moving to you, Kelvin.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing in particular for me to raise. I think most of them were dismissed, and there was one appeal that was allowed, which was for a prior approval for an agricultural building, where we had concerns about the location put forward, that it was proposed around the back of some dwellings, and we felt that a more sensitive siting away from the dwellings might be beneficial, but the inspector considered that it was a suitable location for a agricultural building which wasn't to be used for livestock, and therefore allowed the appeal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kelvin. Do any of the members wish to comment on the appeals?
Yeah, can I just thank Pauline D. Can I just thank the officers very much for the work that they've done over the land off Mill Street in Wem. And once again, it has been this is the second time on appeal. This land has been refused. And it was for the erection of 2 blocks of residential care home right on the edge of the river. So very, very much grateful for their support. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, any other comments on the appeals? No, so we'll move to item 9. To note that the next meeting of Northern Planning Committee will be held at 2 p.m. on Tuesday the 10th of November 2020. That concludes the agenda. I will now close the meeting and ask the committee officer to end the live event. And can I also thank all the officers for their help? And
Chairman, before you close the meeting,
okay,
I'd say how helpful it was